Okay, so my name is Stanford Singer. I'm a physician and MD, born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. In the March of '64, I get a letter from the Selective Service Board. I've been commissioned as an officer in the United States Army. Well, if you accepted an overseas billet and you wanted to take your family, you had to spend 3 years in active duty as opposed to 2 years in active duty. That was a mistake on my part, because everybody I know who accepted the overseas billet, who went to England or went to Germany or went to Japan, they had a fantastic, wonderful time. They never went to Vietnam, and they traveled all over the place. Yom Kippur, 1965. Doc, you better come down here. There's some orders for you. So they brought some planes in the middle of the night, like about 2 o'clock in the morning. And they flew us all to Oakland, California, the Oakland Army Terminal. And they loaded us on a ship. I wake up one morning, I go out on the deck, and the ship is anchored in a bay. So I lean over the railing. There's a guy riding this boat. "Hey, soldier." "Yes, sir." "Where are we?" He says, "You're in Da Nang, sir." I says, "Where's Da Nang?" He says, "Vietnam, sir." Oh. So they drive us and they drop us off in what's called a cantonment area. Many acres. It's a tent city surrounded by multiple barbed wire fences. There are guard posts, elevated guard posts. There are floodlights. There are machine gun installations, and there are mortar pits all around the periphery. So if there was a large battle going on someplace, the really critical guys, they would evacuate to the field hospital by helicopter. But the guys who were wounded, who could wait, they would fill up an airplane. And they would land an airplane full of casualties at the airfield next to the hospital. So I would stand there and they would wheel a guy in, and I had no idea what was wrong with him until I looked at the tag and it said such and such and such and such. And then I would do some minor surgery or whatever to take care of the guy. Well, one of the duties was to be what was called the morgue officer. They bring in a bunch of body bags. They call you. Unzip the body bags, inspect the bodies, determine the cause of death, fill out all these forms for a death certificate. That was one of the most difficult things I had to do. And that gave me nightmares. To see mangled bodies, young guys, looking just like you, wearing the same clothes that you wear, it lasts, the memory lasts with you. I found it exceedingly upsetting. But I remember once they brought in 4 Korean soldiers. The VC had captured them. And the VC had tortured them and mutilated their bodies. It was terrible. It was awful. I don't know how else to describe it, except in my mind, I can still see it and I still get upset about it. We had a tremendous rampant problem with venereal disease. I saw, I would say, 8 to 10 cases of gonorrhea every day. Rampant problem of venereal disease.
How would the troops be contracting that?
There were bars and whorehouses all over the place. So that's, ultimately what happened was, I got orders to go back home. It was very difficult, as I said before, because the Army gave us no help at all. It was very difficult to be in a war zone and to be a warrior, and all of a sudden you're a civilian 48 hours later. I had a very hard time cooling off, readjusting. Things settled down, got home, picked up the kids, and drove to Columbus, Ohio, which is where I took my residency, and that's basically the end of the story.
How long did it take you?
For a long time, a couple of years. When I was in a public place like a restaurant, I had to sit looking at the door. If if I couldn't see the door, I felt anxiety. I felt very, very uncomfortable. I felt this anxiety. That lasted maybe 3 or 4 years till that went away. For many, 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 many years, every time I heard a helicopter go by, I felt anxiety. And I remember once I was at a meeting, a doctor's meeting, and I was at the top floor of a hotel in Chicago, and a helicopter flew by. And in the middle of the meeting, I had to get up. I had to go to the window. I had to see where the helicopter was. I didn't talk about it for years. Didn't talk about it. The things I'm telling you now, my kids never heard. You know,
When you meet someone that was in Vietnam,
there's this brotherhood. There's this brotherhood. You kind of understand each other. And the only people that I could talk to were other guys who were Vietnam vets. I couldn't talk to anybody else. And I couldn't talk to anybody else for, it's hard to explain, but first of all, I felt they wouldn't understand. I felt they didn't want to hear it. And I felt like I was naked, like I was vulnerable.
how did you feel as far as people protesting the war?
It pissed me off. Angry as hell.
And this is like 19...
I got back in '66. Everybody who was there had made a sacrifice. Guys that got killed there, guys that got maimed for life there. And then these kids who were intellects, they didn't give a hoot to hell. They didn't think of the individual soldier. They didn't think of the sacrifices that those guys made. They were protesting a government policy. There was a movie called The Deer Hunter. And a taxi cab stops in front of this hall, and he looks out the window, and all these people are waiting for him to come, and he says to the cab driver, "Keep going." And the next thing you see is he's all alone in a hotel room getting drunk by himself. And that meant something. That got to me. That meant something. You didn't want to talk to anybody about it. You didn't want to relive it. You didn't want to say anything. You leave me alone. Let me be by myself. You know, that's the way it was. The movie Platoon came out. So we went to the local movie theater. We saw the movie. The next morning was my turn to make rounds at the hospital. And I was making rounds, looking at these babies, and I felt like I was on the verge of crying. I was 2 weeks late starting my residency because I had to come back. So when I started, they assigned me to an outpatient clinic, and the other 2 residents in the outpatient clinic were a married couple. She says to me, "You know, you started 2 weeks after everybody else. How come you were so late?" I said, "I was in the Army." She says, "Where were you?" I says, "I was in Vietnam." She says to me, "Did you kill any babies?" I should have said something to her. I didn't say anything to her. Angry, clammed up, walked away.
You're there to heal and honestly protect your fellow soldier too at the same time.
Yeah.
Did you feel that was the major reason what you were contributing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because combat troops will say, "I was there to protect my fellow soldier."
My feeling was to make people better, to heal people, to make people better. I had that. I'm trying to think of the words. I can't think of the words. But I had a higher calling. I had a higher calling. I wasn't there to be a soldier. I was there to be a healer.